76 years, over 1,000 Grand Prix, and more than 1 million search results when you Google F1 Ferrari strategy memes. So, with no particular order, here are 10 times Ferrari strategy really cocked up. Number 1. Wrong size wheels. It's 1951 and the prepubescent days of the Formula 1 World Championship. That doesn't stop Ferrari doing Ferrari things from an early age. The title that year was looking like a straight fight between the Scuderia's Alberto Ascari and Alfa Romeo's Juan Manuel Fangio, and while the latter held the advantage coming into the final round of the Spanish Grand Prix, all was very much still to play for. That was until Ferrari decided to swap out their 18-inch wheels for smaller 16-inch equivalents. Smaller can of course mean better, not that I know anything about that of course. The rationale behind this change was due to the long straight of the Spanish Pedralbes circuit, the smaller wheels theoretically providing the Ferraris with better acceleration and top speed. What the Italians failed to consider was the other part of racetracks. What are they called again? Oh yeah, corners. Said corners proceeded to treat the Scuderia's Pirelli rubber like napalm treats villages, resulting in a farcical display that ultimately cost the team their first taste of championship glory, though at least for Ascari's sake, they managed to get their act together and win it with the Italian in 1952. Also, big thanks to Gemini for helping me research this one. Don't worry, not a sponsor. Have a listen to this. Ferrari did not lose the 1951 championship. Juan Manuel Fangio and his Alfa Romeo won the 1951 World Championship, not Ferrari. What the actual fuck? Number 2. The missing wheel. As a Daniel Ricciardo fan, this one brings back painfully familiar memories. The year is 1999 and Michael Schumacher is locked in a brutal title fight with Mika Häkkinen for championship glory, until he also forgets corners exist and turns both his legs into a jigsaw puzzle. The Scuderia first tried to replace the German with a tyre, and when that wasn't very forthcoming, resorted to leaning on number 2 driver Eddie Irvine to secure them the crown. Only, he's actually holding out his own rather well. Wins at the subsequent Austrian and German rounds set the Northern Irelander up for a monumental upset. Then the European Grand Prix came about, and everything goes to pot. Mixed conditions in that race were causing chaos as was, and Irvine's apparent late call to swap onto Groove's slick tyres caused further drama when the team seemingly failed to be able to count to 4. The timing screens, meanwhile, were busy counting to a much higher number, 48, which was the number of seconds Irvine stood stationary as his team stood around and, in the words of the great Martin Brundle himself, had a committee meeting before sending the driver back out on his way. Ferrari president Luca de Montezemolo reportedly called team officials in for a 2.5-hour bollocking, and when you factor in that Irvine lost the 1999 championship by only 2 points a couple of rounds later, you can kind of understand why, though it did little to dampen rumours that this particular cock-up was all the master plan of the sideline Schumacher himself. How much you want to buy into that, I'll leave up to you. If you want to find out more about that race and the embarrassing cheating scandal that was allegedly exposed at the start, well, I made a video on that a few years ago, so it's floating above my head right now, so you can check that one out after this one. Number 3. The team cover the wrong driver. Okay, so as far as Abu Dhabi controversies go, this one's actually rather tame. However, it still technically impacts Formula 1 to this very day. The 2010 season is a cult classic for many reasons. We had the grand return of Michael Schumacher, mass confusion over what HRT really stood for, and a 5-way championship fight. I mean, imagine having one of those in 2025, only for DTS to still fixate on the apparent rivalry between Charles Leclerc and his piano. 4 drivers remained in contention as the season came to a close in Yas Marina, Ferrari's Fernando Alonso leading the standings from the Red Bulls of Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel, with a fresh-faced, but not so fresh hairline, Lewis Hamilton holding up in 4th. After a hectic opening tour, where Schumacher was almost decapitated on live television, Mark Webber came in for an early pit stop on lap 11, finding himself held up by the sister team car of Jaime Alguersuari and having a potential opportunity the way of the Scuderia. Ferrari therefore opted to sacrifice Felipe Massa for the 718th time in 2010 in the bid to hold up the Red Bull driver even more, but then ballsed up the Brazilian's pit stop, leaving them with no choice but to respond using Alonso instead. Fernando would remain ahead of the Australian, though crucially behind the Renault of Vitaly Petrov. That's okay though, claimed Ferrari. You can overtake around Abu Dhabi. Right? Wrong, and Alonso got to spend his final laps in 2010 staring down the yellow car's French prostate as Sebastian Vettel emerged out of nowhere to snatch the championship in the dying seconds. In the end, this race ended up playing as even more of a reason to have DRS implemented for the 2011 season onwards, and while in hindsight maybe it's easy to criticise this one, it still cost Ferrari a championship, so it's worthy enough for this list in my book. Number 4. Who needs fresh tyres anyway? So this one also involves Fernando Alonso's Grand Prix being turned upside down, though this time in the more literal fashion. Having baptised Haas into the Formula 1 field at the 2016 Australian Grand Prix, the red flag was out and some pretty key decisions had to be made. Sebastian Vettel had stormed to an unlikely lead off the start, so having just pitted before the race was suspended, Ferrari decided to leave the German out on the worn super soft compound for the restart. As Mercedes fitted the medium, setting Nico Rosberg on for the winning strategy, Vettel trundled home in third, potentially on for a P2, before deciding he didn't actually fancy that with a couple of tours to go. On the bright side, Ferrari took this result as proof they could now mix it with the dominant Silver Arrows for the remainder of the 2016 season. Ferrari didn't win a race for the remainder of the 2016 season. Number 5. Ferrari get cocky in Monaco of all places. Now we enter the Charles Leclerc era, which means pain anytime Monaco rolls around. It's the Monegasque's first home Grand Prix wearing the colours of the prancing horse, and with a powerful and totally not illegal in any way engine behind them, prospects look good for Leclerc's home race. Qualifying would still be vital though, and getting through Q1 would be the first, albeit easiest step towards that journey. Or maybe not, as it turned out. Having watched Sebastian Vettel's dementia drift him into the barriers, Ferrari decided to play it safe on the other side of the garage, which meant leaving Leclerc in the pits while the track was at its fastest, and neglecting the early warning signs of the Haas pair running quicker with still over 3 minutes left on the clock. That then became the 2 Alfa Romeos, and the 2 McLarens, and then teammate Vettel, who had the honour of knocking the second Ferrari out of his home race, the team later conceding they weren't expecting the track to get faster at the end of the session, because that's not happened at any of the 1,000 Grand Prix that's happened before that, has it? Sunday wasn't much better, as Leclerc tried to make up for the previous afternoon's clusterfuck by leaving it all out on the racetrack. And by all, I mean the floor of his SF90. Still, when it comes to Monaco and Charles Leclerc, things somehow get worse, though we'll get to that later. Number 6. Vettel appoints himself as head of strategy. You think with one car already out of the running at the 2020 Spanish Grand Prix, your life would be that little bit easier. That said, Ferrari had told Sebastian Vettel he was sacked before the year got going, and had seemingly forgotten he was still driving for them in this one. Sebastian was boxed onto the softs on lap 28. Now for new fans, that's the compound of tyre that is the fastest, theoretically, though also dies the quickest. And yet the Scuderia wanted the German to go all the way to the end of the race. Or did they? The team came over the radio to instruct the German to push for 3 laps, only to then change their mind, and instead asked Seb to shelve that idea and tried to make it to the end. This rather upset the 4-time world champion, Ferrari only able to offer their now infamous "we are checking" response, as Vettel took it upon himself to instruct his team as to what to do next. As the glue factory continued to buffer on the sidelines, Vettel was able to strategize himself to P7 come the flag, which was seen as a minor miracle considering the shitbox they had underneath them in 2020. Number 7. After a much better Saturday in 2022, Charles Leclerc found himself leading the opening stages of a very damp Monaco Grand Prix. Said dampness was drying out fast though, and it may just have been possible to switch from the full wet tyre to dry slicks and skip out the intermediate compound, though Ferrari only had this epiphany after boxing Leclerc from P1. That meant the Monegasque got a solid 4 laps out of the green sidewall tyre before being double stacked behind his teammate, who had just inherited the lead. And it's worth pointing out that Ferrari didn't even know any of this was going on. That gave us a now iconic team radio from the start of this entry, but the pain wouldn't stop there, as Red Bull performed the overcut of dreams to place Verstappen ahead of Leclerc, and more crucially, Sergio Perez in the lead ahead of both Ferraris. You know, back when the Mexican could still do that sort of thing. Given this is Monaco, it will come as no surprise that that's how the order remains come the end of the Grand Prix, and a single shot from the Leclerc residence was heard later that afternoon. Number 8. It's 2022 again. My home Grand Prix this time around, and as per usual, it was pissing it down. That said, we were never quite able to ascertain whether the water was coming from the clouds or just Leclerc fans' tears. Carlos Sainz leads the early stages in what could be a big swing for the championship. Max Verstappen hampered by a bit of dirty AlphaTauri tarnishing his Red Bull. The Scuderia thus orchestrated a swap to allow Leclerc to seize P1 from his teammates, and that's how the order looked to stay, until Esteban Ocon decided it was a perfect time to start being French. The Alpine's retirement, with just under 15 laps to go, brought out the safety car, Sainz taking the opportunity to box for fresh rubber, while Leclerc just didn't do that. Ferrari were then surprised when Leclerc identified as a sitting duck on the restarts, which is a bit like smoking through pregnancy and then being shocked when your baby turns out to be a Lando Norris fan. Charles dropped like a stone, handing Team LH with one of their final additions to the wank bank, and by the end of it, forfeiting what could have been a crucial point swing in the 2022 championship. Granted, with hindsight, it probably wasn't, though at this stage, Ferrari fans did still have that last ounce of hope. At least Sainz benefited to take his first Grand Prix victory, though the team was so depressed, hardly any of them showed up to congratulate him. Number 9. Guess what year it is again? Barely 3 rounds after Silverstone, and the Scuderia were in hot water once again, as F1 rolled into Hungary, and the Ferrari officials realised they'd left their eyes at home. If the early stages of this Grand Prix had taught us anything, it was to stay as far away from the hard compound of tyre as humanly possible, like it was the plague, or that pastor at your local church that the grown-ups said not to worry about. The pair of Ferraris were in winning contention at this point, only for Charles to pit on lap 40 and switch on to guess what? The hard compound of tyre. Might as well have shoved a shotgun under his chin while they were at it. That turned the Monegasque into a mobile chicane for the remainder of this one, Max Verstappen enjoying this overtake so much he fancied spinning out just so he could do it again. The Dutchman would go on to take a dominant victory, while Leclerc's Haas didn't even have the longevity to make it to the end. P6 by the flag, and any championship hopes well and truly out the window. Right, we could stay on 2022 for the remainder of the video, but you know what, let's give another year some love. Number 10, 2025. That's it, I think it kind of sums things up. Announcing that Lewis Hamilton would join the team for the start of 2025, no doubt generated a load of hype around the Scuderia this year, and while they still somehow hold on to P2 in the Constructors' Championship, at least as of recording of this video, it's not exactly been the smoothest of sailing. Having already become the first team to have both cars disqualified for entirely separate infringements at the Chinese Grand Prix, Hamilton got his first taste of Ferrari pain a few rounds later in Miami. Starting on split strategies, which was already a concern given the team would now have to multitask, Hamilton benefited from an early stop under the VSC to get on the back of teammate Leclerc. With more pace underneath him, the Briton felt he deserved a swap, only this was far too complex a command for the Ferrari team to understand. With the glue factory checking for half a decade, the decision to grant Hamilton his wish was made on lap 39, by which point Lewis was already coming out with sarcastic comments such as, yeah, have a tea break while you're at it, and his once fresh Pirelli rubber had been shot to shit by his teammates' dirty air. That meant the Briton wasn't able to make any inroads into the next car of Antonelli over the next 12 laps, while the Ferrari pit wall drew straws over who had to tell #blessed he now had to give the position back. The Briton relinquished position, and when Hamilton was alerted to Sainz's proximity behind, his frustration was clear. Do you want me to let him past as well? Still my favourite piece of team radio from this entire season. P8 by the flag, and a completely silent in-lap into the pits, kind of speaks volumes on this one. Anyway, that was 10 asinine Ferrari strategies, and really, we're just scraping the surface here. So if you'd like a part 2, let me know down in the comments with what you'd like to see included. And yes, I'm basically getting you to do my research for me, so tough shit. If you enjoyed this video though, would like to find out 10 times the rest of the grid was stupid, well, you can check that video out somewhere up here. Big thank you to the members and patrons who got this one early, and get the occasional and exclusive video over there too. Links down in the description if you'd like to check that out and support the channel further. Otherwise, liking and subscribing goes a long way to help me out, and lets me get closer to that 200k goal by the end of the year. I'll be back with something else relatively soon, but until then, have a good one.